On August 1st, 1965, a dramatic, large-scale UFO incursion took place at F.E. Warren Air Force Base in Wyoming, as this declassified report confirms. Dozens of sightings of disc-shaped craft cavorting at low altitude over Minuteman missile silos, known as launch facilities, were reported by the Air Force security personnel guarding them. Former launch officer Jay Earnshaw has discussed his involvement in one such incident that night.
I was in command of Capsule Echo 1 at Warren Air Force Base. Got a call about 3:30 in the morning, somewhere that time, from the flight security controller above, who said that, "Sir, there's some strange objects out there." I says, "What do you mean?" And turns out that he had observed, along with the rest of his response team members, what looked like 5 to 6 oblong lights stacked on top of one another, just outside the gate at Echo 1. They didn't seem to cause any particular damage. They didn't seem to put out any beams of light or anything else like that. They simply were there, stacked up. It was rather a benign incident at the time. The paperwork all disappeared.
Over the next 2 years, similar UFO incursions also took place at Minot Air Force Base, North Dakota, and Ellsworth Air Force Base, South Dakota. Although those disturbing incidents were reported in official records at the time and occasionally leaked to the media, many of the details only emerged decades later in the testimony of former missile launch officers.
I was on duty at Echo, which is our squadron command post. We had strike teams respond to alarms from the missiles. They were 3 to 5 miles away. And they jumped in their trucks and went roaring out there and called me back and said, "Sir, for lack of a better description, there's a flying saucer hovering over that missile, and there's a beam of reddish light going down to it." I assume they were taking data with that beam. It wasn't destructive as far as I know. It had to be a data collection thing. I'm sure they scanned the warhead or something or other.
Although the Air Force could not yet know it, the most dramatic nuclear weapons-related UFO incidents were about to occur.
During the pre-departure crew briefing, it was mentioned that some missiles at November flight had gone off alert. We reached the launch control facility. We entered the gate after giving the appropriate password, and the above-ground personnel briefed us on what had happened. And essentially, we were told by site manager that an object had been sighted out the windows with flashing lights, and it was probably about 80 to 100 feet in diameter. It then went to our main gate where it hovered, and when we debriefed the underground launch crew, they indicated that all the missiles that they controlled had gone off alert at the time that object had been hovering next to the main gate. My crew commander, Major Tollerud, told me that he had received a call overnight, evidently while I was on rest break below ground, and saying that we as a crew were never to speak about this again. This was a very serious incident. I mean, something to take our nuclear-tipped missiles off alert. It was something that we had never been prepared for.
The same year that these amazing events were unfolding in secrecy, Secretary of the Air Force Harold Brown appeared before a congressional hearing and dismissed the idea that information about UFOs was being kept from the American public.
We have not been hiding anything. The investigations have been made public. The explanations of those where there is a clear explanation have been made public. The hearing this morning was public for just that reason.
Brown's claims have now been discredited, but the strict security measures imposed on military witnesses at the time meant that decades would pass before the public learned the facts about UFO activity at nuclear missile sites. In any case, the next known incident, at Malmstrom Air Force Base, Montana in March 1967, left no doubt that those aboard the UFOs were intent on disrupting the functionality of American ICBMs in their underground silos. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, UFOs began to appear at missile test ranges, often during launches designed to improve the performance and reliability of America's ICBMs and the deadly warheads they carried. Occasionally, those aboard the UFOs did more than watch the tests. While the exact date remains uncertain, sometime in the fall of 1964, an incident occurred at Vandenberg Air Force Base, California, which has come to be the best-known, most astonishing example of deliberate UFO interference with our nuclear weapons systems. Although the case is still classified top secret, a former Air Force officer, Dr. Robert Jacobs, has openly discussed it. At the time, Lieutenant Jacobs, who was assigned to the 1369th Photographic Squadron and held the title Officer in Charge of Photo Instrumentation, was tasked with filming missile launches from a remote mountaintop site on California's Big Sur coastline, using a powerful telescopic camera. The ascending ICBMs would initially fill the camera frame, permitting a detailed view of engine performance, staging, and other aspects of a given launch as they raced out over the Pacific Ocean. Following one such test launch, Lieutenant Jacobs was unexpectedly told to report to the office of Major Florenz Mansman, a photographic analyst assigned to Vandenberg's Office of the Chief Scientist, 1st Strategic Aerospace Division. Upon arriving, he noticed two mysterious men in gray suits, who he later learned were CIA officers. A motion picture projector had been set up, and without explanation, Major Mansman turned it on, telling Jacobs, "Watch this." Jacobs, later a university professor, describes what happened next.
On the screen was the film we had shot. The nose cones separate. The chaff flew out in front of it. We saw this as obviously reflections of light rippling like that. And then we saw the dummy warhead flying along. It's going between 6,000 and 8,000 miles an hour at that point, and it's on the fringe of space. And suddenly, into that frame, an object flew in, chasing the chaff, the warhead, and so on, at the same speed. And in polar orbit, it fired a beam of light at the warhead. The beam of light struck that. The object flew up, shot another beam of light at the dummy warhead, went around, shot another beam of light at it, went down, shot a beam of light, and then flew out the same way it had come in, at which time the dummy warhead fell out of the frame. The lights came on, and Major Mansman said to me, "Were you guys screwing around up there?" And I said, "No, sir." And he said, "What was that?" And I said, "It looks like we got a UFO." And he said, "Lieutenant Jacobs, you are never to speak of this again. It never happened."
Decades later, Dr. Mansman, by then a researcher at Stanford University, informed Dr. Jacobs that after he had left the room, the two CIA officers quickly confiscated the film of the amazing incident, telling Mansman that it was classified top secret. Mansman also confirmed, in letters to various researchers, that before the film was whisked away, he had conducted an extensive frame-by-frame analysis of it using a magnifier, which revealed the UFO in great detail. He wrote, quote, "The shape was a classic disc. The center seemed to be a raised bubble. The entire lower saucer shape was glowing and seemed to be rotating slowly. At the point of beam release, the object turned like it was required to be in a position to fire from a platform. The assumption was, at that time, extraterrestrial." Responding to the retired major's revelations, Dr. Jacobs wrote, quote, "Those beams of light were a warning, a shot fired across the bow of our nuclear silliness ship.